Let's get into today's episode of Why We Succeed.
Yo, what is going on, everybody? It's your man, Immanuel. We are back with a new episode of Why We Succeed. Today, I have a very, very special guest, the one and only my girl, Aisha Taylor. What's going on with you?
I'm good.
Oh, man, I'm so honored to have you on the podcast, man. Yo, it's been a minute since we've linked up and had a conversation talking about your journey as an entrepreneur this time around, and I'm looking forward to doing just that. But there's one question I always like to kick things off with every guest that I bring on, and that's, how do you personally define success? What is it for you, Aisha?
What I would say about success is that it's not just monetary. I think that sometimes people link success to whatever their income goals are, whatever their business growth goals are, or whatever accolades they're receiving, or whatever other people are saying about who they are. And I think that a lot of times we can link our success to external things. But I think that success means, of course, being able to accomplish your goals, but also remaining true, authentic to yourself, and also rooted in Jesus Christ. Because to me, there is no success apart from him. And so if I'm chasing success and I'm leaving, my foundation of faith, then it doesn't matter to me. And I've done that before and it's left me empty. And so for me, success is being present as a mom, being able to enjoy the things that don't matter. I remember a long time ago, I got this lesson, never forgot it. Because you know how people say, take time to smell the roses. And you're like, who
Right.
thought that and why? Like, that's random. But I remember going on a walk with my family. And I'm walking, just power walking, not really paying attention. And my mom says, oh, did you notice that rose bush? I was like, what rose bush? And she said, the one you walk right past. I was like, there's a rose bush that I literally walk right past. She was like, yeah, it's right there. And I'm like, I turn around and there's a real rose bush.
Wow.
I had no idea they had red roses on it. And I never saw it because I was so laser focused on my walk, right? Don't miss this. I was so laser focused on my walk that I didn't see the beauty that was around me. And that was a long time ago. I had to have been maybe 10 to 15 years ago.
Okay.
And I never forgot that message that we can't be so focused on our walk, whatever that walk is, that we miss out on the things that matter. Because me as a single mom, success to me isn't worth it if I miss my kids growing up. Right. Me as a believer, success from a material perspective isn't worth it if it means that I lose my foundation in faith and who I am. And I've had, a successful career in corporate, but in that successful career in corporate, I literally lost who I was, fell into depression. I ended up having health challenges because of it. Praise God, I'm healed and everything. Yes. But I know what it's like to be chasing a corporate goal. I was working 70 hours a week, was raising my hand for every project, also dealing with workplace bullying. So I was trying to also prove that I was worthy, that I was focused on that walk, that everything else fell by the wayside, and I ended up miserable. And so as a full-time entrepreneur, that's something that I was just like, I'm doing it differently. I'm doing it with the Lord at the forefront. I'm doing it with being a good steward over my children, while also doing the work that God has called me to do.
Oh, man. You share it so much, and I'm just trying to think about where I want to go next. But I think what I want to focus in on is something that you had mentioned about your journey, which was the fact that your faith is a huge foundation on how you define success. And for some people, that's very difficult. They feel like they either have to choose one or the other. And I'm curious, how are you able to kind of find synergy amongst the two? Like, how does that work for you personally?
So I'll give you a little context for where I used to be, and then you can appreciate where I am now. But the short answer to your question is, I don't care what people think.
I hear that.
I don't care. You either like it or you don't. And if you don't, you don't have to be on the platform. You don't have to come to my brand. You don't have to come to my website. You don't have to buy my services. I really don't care.
Yeah.
Because to me, I'm not going to forsake the Lord to get business. It's just not going to happen. But I remember being newer in faith. And this has been, I started my business about 10 years ago.
Okay.
And I remember in the beginning, not only was I a new born again believer, I had already As I was a new born again believer around the same time as I started my business.
Okay.
Maybe about, I would say probably a year or so before, where I rededicated my life to Christ. It was about a year before I started my business, a little over a year. And so for me, I started my business. This freshly into this born again believer, in my faith. And I remember being afraid to talk about Jesus.
Mm,
I kept everything separate. It was
mhm.
either personal finances or it was Jesus, in my prayer time, my devotional time, my
Right.
private time. And my business and life was totally
Mhm.
separate. It was very compartmentalized. And then I remember it was when I started to go through hard times,
Mm,
when I realized I couldn't keep my life compartmentalized. I couldn't keep Jesus in my home, right? And
mm.
do everything else apart from Jesus. But he had to be it was like synergy throughout everything. He had to be
Yeah.
the common thread throughout everything. But it really took me being in a workplace bullying situation. And it was
Mm.
interesting. I wrote my best-selling book when I was dealing with workplace bullying. And so
Wow.
not too long after I started my business, I ended up dealing with workplace bullying. I'm this
Mm.
new born again believer. I'm trying to create my exit strategy from corporate, right?
Right.
And I was afraid that if I talked too much about God, people wouldn't people would run from me.
Mhm.
I didn't think
Mhm.
people wanted it. But once I got to a point where life was so painful that
Mhm.
Jesus started to, like, no pun intended, bleed into everything. That I did. I noticed,
Right.
like, I was doing, personal notes in my newsletter
Mhm.
at the time, and I would just find myself speaking from the heart. And
Yeah.
then Jesus would creep in there.
Wow.
And then it was interesting. A funny thing happened that the newsletters where I talked about business and finances, personal
Mhm.
finances and Jesus,
Mhm.
those were the ones that people resonated with. Those
Wow.
were the ones where people were responding. They were hitting a reply
Mhm.
button. They'd be like, girl, me too. Oh my gosh, I needed that. I needed that inspiration. And I'm like, I needed to get that off my chest and send it. And it
Right.
people were really being blessed by it. Their lives were being changed by it. And then when I became a single mom,
Mhm.
I didn't know what else to do. Because I
Mm.
remember when I found out I was pregnant, when their
Mhm.
dad left, all I could do, and at this time I'm a full-time entrepreneur.
Okay.
And I had enough money, right? I was making enough money in my business where I was covering all my monthly bills
Okay.
and with no extra.
Oh,
I
okay.
don't
Got you.
recommend
Got you.
I don't recommend that if you're planning to leave corporate. I would say create a whole strategy, have
Mhm.
your money saved up, get to a point where you're like you paid off your debt and you really are making, about what you made in corporate, right? So
Right.
you're not cutting it that close. But for me, the reason why I did that is I was dealing with workplace bullying.
Mhm.
And it had been 2.5 years, and it got to the point where my
Mhm.
doctor told me to go on FMLA or quit. And so I needed to leave my job to preserve
Mhm.
and protect my health. And then
Right.
from there, I took on a temporary job, which was cool in the beginning, but then it started to get kind of messy. And I could feel
Mm.
the Lord saying it was time to exit and become a full time entrepreneur. But I was
Right.
terrified. But then some stuff started to remind me of what I went through for 2.5 years in my other job, where I'm just like, I'm going with what God said. Like,
Yeah.
I can't continue to be here and put myself in this situation. I'm about to go with what God said, and I'm gonna trust. And
Mhm.
so that's what I did. And it was not ideal.
Mm.
If I was gonna say if I had to do it all over again, I would make some changes, but I wouldn't stay at the end of the day. I'm like, actually, I wouldn't change anything because I'm not going to compromise my health and I'm
Right.
not going to compromise who I am. And in that, I saw just how faithful the Lord was. But so I knew that their dad was going to leave, and I think he had just left. And
Mm.
so I'm sitting in the corner of my room with the window shades pulled down, making it as dark as possible, rolled up in a fetal position,
Mhm.
crying because I
Mhm.
had no idea what was next. I thought when I quit my job it was going to be one income for one person.
Mhm.
Now it was one income for three people.
Right.
I had no idea where that gap was going to be met. I had no idea because I remember I said I just had enough money to cover my bills. Just
Right. Right.
so, but now I need baby stuff. I need to get baby
Mhm.
clothes. I need to get cribs. I need to get, bouncers, pack, like all of that
Yeah.
stuff. And that's just to prepare for the babies, right?
Right.
And
Right.
then you have like everything else once the kids are there, right? I have
Yes.
friends, that's why I'm using plural for if people are like, why does she keep saying plural? But I just remember in that moment being so overcome with fear, worry, anxiety, and uncertainty that all I
Mhm.
could do was sit in a ball in a corner of my dark room
Mhm.
and just cry, Jesus, Jesus, Jesus.
Mhm.
And that was all I could utter. And I
Mhm.
realized that the name Jesus is a complete prayer because
Mhm.
that was all I had the strength to do
Right.
at that particular point in time. But yeah, I'm a full-time entrepreneur at this
Mhm.
point. And so in those moments, it was hard for me to see past my pain and compartmentalize Jesus
Mhm.
to my personal life when I'm in the corner of my room, rolled up in a ball crying.
Yeah.
I have to be able to write something. And when I look back at some of those old newsletters, they are full of
Mhm.
pain. They're
Mhm.
so full of pain, but yet there's this hope in them
Mhm.
as well. There's scriptures in there, and there's this little glimmer of hope, even in the midst of those painful newsletters.
Mhm.
But really, it was at that point when I was pregnant and had no idea what else to do, where I really leaned into like my everything I do, including my finances, including my business. It has
Mhm.
to be rooted in the Word of God.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. Yeah. I can totally understand why you're at a point where you're like, you know what? I'm not compromising my faith. I don't care what other people's perspectives or opinions may be. Like, you've understood that your faith is your foundation
Mhm.
and it's a part of everything that you do, whether it's personal, whether it's family, whether it's even your business. And I think that that's so important because oftentimes new entrepreneurs will make compromises, especially when it comes to their faith. Unfortunately, some people feel like there needs to be this divide between what they believe from a spiritual perspective and the work that they're doing as a professional. So I'm really glad that you could speak on why sometimes that's not even necessary and it could actually be to somebody's detriment to try to
Mhm.
separate the 2.
Yeah, and I think what I realized, the funny thing is my
Mhm.
business started to go faster.
Mhm.
When I began
Wow.
to talk about Jesus, my business started growing faster.
See.
Um, and it turned out people were hungry for it.
Mhm.
People needed hope.
Yeah.
And where's the ultimate hope? Right?
It's
It's in
God.
Jesus and
Yeah.
it's in God, right? And I'm sitting up here withholding that hope.
Right. Like, how
Hope.
does that work?
How does that work? The
Yeah.
same hope that was getting me out of bed every morning when
Mhm.
all I could see was pain in front of me.
Right.
That same hope that caused me to keep showing up and not run
Mhm.
back, to what was comfortable.
Yeah.
Um, it was that hope.
Yeah.
And I realized too that one of the things that my brand it wasn't
Mhm.
just personal finances.
Mm.
It wasn't just that. It
Mhm.
was hope.
Yeah,
Because so many people lose hope over their finances, over their
they
money.
do.
But if I
They
can
do.
give them hope and tools, then they're in a
Right.
good place.
Yeah. Like, you're equipping them in more than one way, right? Because it's good to have those financial tools to get yourself in order, but then if your spiritual, your mental, everything else is just,
Mhm.
I guess, it's in chaos, then the ability to properly apply the things that you've learned when it comes to your finances is going to be more challenging. It's only when you are a healed, whole person, you got to grasp on your spiritual, your mental, your physical, and everything that's related to that. Then can you apply those tools and it be effective?
So, and this is why I help single moms develop the strategy to live whole, financially free, and rooted in Jesus Christ. Because at the core of it, just like what you said, is that people can't implement
Yeah.
the things that they learn when they lack wholeness, when they lack a spiritual foundation, when
Mhm.
they lack, stability um or mental peace.
Mhm.
And and I can say this also from a single mom perspective. I'm the personal finance lady, right?
Yes.
And and I don't say this to brag, but to really let you know, like, how strong in finances I am. Like, I've
Mhm.
developed a curriculum for Essence magazine for personal
Mm.
finances.
Wow.
I've been featured in Essence a number of different times. I forget how many, over
Mhm.
for personal finances. I've been in
Wow.
Black Enterprise twice.
Wow.
Jet Magazine, taught workshops at Google, been featured in a number of different places, right?
Mhm.
Throughout my personal finance career as an entrepreneur. But when I became a single mom, you would have thought that the light bulbs would have been like, I got this. I got
Yeah.
this.
Mm.
But nothing was working for me.
Mm.
The same tools that I have been teaching for years, the
Mhm.
same tips that I have been working with people on. At that point, no, it was later on. Actually, early on in my motherhood journey, I was actually an outside consultant to a credit union
Oh,
where
wow.
people got denied for loans.
Mhm.
Part of their reapplication process was to come see me.
Wow. Wow.
And I would work with them on creating a budget. I would work with them on creating a whole money plan
Mhm.
that would help them to repay their debt, increase their credit score, and position them to reapply for their loans.
Mhm.
That was a part of this credit union's process. They saw me.
Wow.
But here I am as a single mom,
Mhm.
teaching these people, working with these people to get their financial houses in order. And I was watching mine fall apart.
Mm.
Watching mine fall apart.
Wow.
And I felt like such a hypocrite.
Mm.
And here's a note for somebody who's a new entrepreneur.
Mhm.
Sometimes you feel like you're unqualified for your own business. Sometimes you might feel like, what am I doing? There is no space for me. I have no business being here. Who am
Mm.
I to show up and say that I do these things? Who am I?
Yeah.
And if you ever feel like that, I encourage you to seek therapy, find, like, if you're not a believer, I was gonna say prayer, but if you're not a believer, I don't know what you would do. Therapy is always good for even if you're a believer. Um,
Mhm.
but do something to get yourself out of that space.
Right.
Because if you stay in that pit of despair, if you stay in that place of inadequacy, if you stay in this place where you feel like you're not good enough or that you're a fraud or you're a hypocrite, if you feel like you're a hypocrite, you
Yeah.
might examine why you feel like that. Like, maybe
Right.
there might be some
Right.
going on for real. That might be my way of being like, examine yourself, right?
Yes.
I want to be very clear on that. But then
Mhm.
outside of that, like, if there's no disconnect, sometimes we can allow situations and circumstances in our lives to question who we are and
Mhm.
question our abilities and question whose we are.
Yeah.
And it's very dangerous if you're in that place, if you don't allow yourself to be able to find a way out.
Yeah.
Because I ended up quitting my job, my own business, for like 3 years.
Mm. Wow. Wow.
Yeah, like
Yo,
quitting.
you have to do what's necessary, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Because I felt so conflicted. I'm like,
Mhm.
who am I to help all these people get financially free? I'm like, can I start with myself first? Because
Mm.
I'm watching my investment account collapse. I'm
Mm.
watching my assets that I had built up go away. I
Mm.
watched my bank account collapse. I watched
Wow.
everything that I built
Mhm.
over years collapse in front of my face.
Wow. Wow.
Why? Why? The wholeness piece,
Mm.
the healing piece,
Mhm.
the feeling inadequacy piece. Because when their dad walked out, it really destroyed my self worth,
Mm.
confidence, and self esteem. Destroyed it.
Mhm.
I felt like, how in the Bible, how when the spies of Israel went out to go spy the land, and they said we were but grasshoppers in our
Yes.
own eyes.
Right.
We were but grasshoppers in their eyes. I felt like less than a grasshopper.
Mm.
Because at least a
Wow.
grasshopper could jump. Like,
Right.
I felt like an ant under someone's shoe,
Mm. Wow.
crushed. That was how I felt.
Mhm.
And, at that point, the enemy was whispering in my ear, like, "Oh, look at your finances. You talking about you can do this? Dude, you talking about you can do
Mm,
this? Who are you?" And I'm like, "Well, he left, so who are you?"
mm,
And all of that was in my head, and
mhm.
I just I could not get out of that spot.
Yeah.
I tried so hard, but I ended up falling into despair, ended up falling actually into depression,
Mm,
with my own business, and I felt so inadequate. And when the Lord was bringing me back to, work with my business again, I really
mhm,
resisted because I still
mm,
felt so inadequate. But it
mhm,
was through therapy, it was through prayer, it was through reading the word, um, Bible studies, small groups
mhm.
that allowed me to get to a place where I was healthy
Yeah.
again mentally, because the only space that I had available during that time was
Mhm.
to show up for my kids.
Yeah.
That was it. Like, they were my why. I was
Mm,
having such a hard time just being able to function emotionally
yeah.
that I'm like, you know what? God gave me my kids. I will not fail them.
Right.
The only energy I had was to pour into motherhood. And I'm just like, I can't fail at this. And
Yeah.
so that's what I did. And so that's why I say, like, you have to be careful about the words that you say, the messages that you hear, you allow people, what people say to you that you allow to
Mhm.
stick,
Yeah.
and seeking healing, because your healing is going to impact your business. It'll
Mhm.
impact your finances. If you're a parent, it'll impact how you show up with your kids. If you're still employed full time, it will impact how you show up at work, and it will impact how you show up and your ability to be effective in doing the work of the Lord. And it
Yeah.
wasn't until I began to heal
Mhm.
that my finances started to change.
Wow.
It wasn't until I began to heal and draw nearer to God where where I was able to get back and restart what I had shut down.
Wow. Wow. You have you have definitely encountered a lot of obstacles along your journey. And I love the fact that you talk about all of the different things that you used in order to, overcome many of those obstacles. Your faith and drawing closer to God, going through healing and seeking counseling. All of those things are important. And I'm sure you didn't necessarily mention it yet, but I'm sure having family and support
Oh,
around you to
absolutely.
go through all of that is vitally important as well. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. My family, like, man, my family was there for me. My family was there
Yo,
for
that's
me.
a blessing.
It's a
That
blessing.
is such a
I know
blessing.
everybody doesn't have that.
And with that in mind, right, having encountered so many different challenges, both when you were in corporate and then when you were an entrepreneur and kind of having to work through those things, what would you advise to somebody who is a new business owner and they are starting to kind of feel that same sense that you mentioned, either imposter syndrome or feeling like they're a hypocrite or doubting the fact that they have something of value to add to their clientele? What would you say to them to help them to push past
That's a great question.
that?
Really great question. The first thing I would say is, of course, foundation is in faith.
Yes.
And I really believe that, like, we have to realize that this is bigger than us.
Hmm.
Because when we realize that this is bigger than us, and if you're somebody who's like a believer with like me, I believe that God has a purpose and plan for me. And funny story, right? And
Hmm.
knowing also Romans 8:28, that all things work together for the good of those who love him and are called according to
Yes.
his purpose, right? So I began to feel that
Mm.
what I was going through wasn't wasted. Actually, pretty early on, actually before I quit my own job, my own business, I feel that.
Right.
Um, but what happened is that what the Lord was saying during that time is that if I have, so keep in mind, I also have passed the certified financial planning exam. I took all the courses related to the certified financial planning, um,
Hmm.
designation. I never finished because I ended up
Mm.
getting pregnant and fell behind
Hmm.
on the continuing education credits. I had everything. So I had to start over from scratch.
Mm.
So I have that background. I
Hmm.
have a MBA in finance. I
Wow.
have an undergraduate degree in economics.
Wow.
I used to be a statistics tutor when I was in college.
Wow.
So
Yeah, you know them numbers.
I know my numbers, right? I know my numbers. But yet the enemy tried to convince me that I was worthless, like
Mm,
had nothing to offer. And I think
right.
that a couple of things I want to say, starting with faith. Faith is foundation to me for everything.
Mhm.
But I also want to give practical tips for people who might not be there. Because
Okay.
sometimes faith can be hard when when you're staring down the like a valley of a pit, right?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
really hard. But there's other things that you can do. Therapy is essential.
Mhm.
Things started to really get better when I went to life coaching. I hired a
Mhm.
Christian life coach,
Okay.
um, started going to therapy, got into small groups at church. And so we were able to meet and discuss the word of God. I was able to read,
Mhm.
I read lots of Christian books. What is this book? What's the name of this book? It was a book there's two books that were rooted in
Mhm.
faith, really helped me. Priscilla Shire, Life Interrupted. Oh,
Okay.
it's a good book. Life Interrupted. That really came at a critical clutch time for me.
Nice.
Another one, Stephen Furtick's
Mm.
Unqualified.
Okay. Okay.
Both of those books really helped me to be able to face the imposter syndrome and to
That's
begin
good.
to look at what I was feeling differently.
Mhm.
I also read the entire book of Exodus.
Okay.
I read
Yeah.
it, I just little by little, I read it all of 2007. Did not read
Okay.
anything else but Exodus.
Wow.
And I went through it little by little because when you think about imposter syndrome, when you think about the things that you mentioned, that's a form of bondage.
Yes.
And so when you think about it that way, people are in bondage when they feel like that.
Mhm.
And there's a process and there was a way to get out of that. And so I love the connection between the people of Israel.
Mhm.
They're leaving the bondage of slavery to
Yeah.
be able to position themselves to get into the promised land. Of course, the story continues over in Numbers and Joshua and
Mhm.
everything like that. But that process of being able to get out, that process of being able to, you know, be able to hear the promise, see the
Right.
promise, believe the promise, see the mistakes and learn from the mistakes of other people.
Mhm.
Like those things were really helpful to me. And finding scripture that talks about our identity.
Mhm.
That thing, like Ephesians 2:10 is a good one. For we are God's workmanship created in Christ Jesus for good works. Like that, right?
Yeah.
So finding scriptures to be able to remind you of
Mhm.
who we are through Jesus, who that God has a purpose and plan for us, that He
Yeah.
didn't take us as far to leave us, and He will never leave us or forsake us. I
That's
began
right.
to out onto this last one more recently, right?
Mhm.
But but I think that that's all important. And the other thing too that really helped me as
Mhm.
well is to begin to write out my accolades. And
Mm.
I know that might sound kind of weird, but I literally wrote out all of the awards that I can remember. Going back to like elementary school, like
Wow.
you
Yo,
know,
that's good though. It's showing you what
like
you've done.
I was on a D's list in college, like
Right.
all the National Honor Society. Like I literally like write everything out
Mhm.
so I can see that I
Yeah.
had a history of success. I
Yes.
had a history of doing amazing things. I started to try to remember what good things that people had said to me because
Mhm.
so often I focus on the negative of what he said
Right.
and it drowned out everything that anybody else had ever said that was good. And
Mhm.
so I'm a big believer. Matter of fact, I was just talking about this recently to a group of moms. So in the Bible, one of the things I love the Bible, and
Mhm.
I absolutely I love the Old Testament. Like,
Yeah.
and I think sometimes as Christians we neglect the Old Testament, but it is so rich. It
It
is so rich. And one of the things that I absolutely love is when the Israelites crossed over the Jordan
Mhm.
to take over the promised land, to be able to claim the
Mhm.
promised land. What did they do right after they crossed over? He said, Joshua said, hey, leaders of the 12 tribes of Judah, of Israel,
Mhm.
go get rocks.
Yeah.
And get these rocks, and we're going to stack these 12 rocks up on this side of the Jordan as
Mhm.
a memorial
Right.
to God.
Mm-hmm.
A memorial that God is a God who keeps his promises, a memorial to the fact that he parted the Jordan River, he parted the Red Sea, he delivered us out of bondage, he delivered us from the hand of Pharaoh, he made a promise to Abraham, the same God who made the
Mm-hmm.
promise to Abraham that his descendants would be number like the stars in the sky, the
Yep.
sand, grains of sand, right? That is the same God who just delivered us across the Jordan River. So
Mm-hmm.
now we could take the promised land.
Right.
Like, and I love that. And I realized that things that started to make all the difference to me
Mm-hmm.
was when I began to remember God's faithfulness. When I don't have, the funny thing is I actually bought rocks, but they're still in the bag because sometimes I
Mm-hmm.
start and don't finish them. But I got rocks and I got a little marker, and it's still
Mm-hmm.
everything in the bag. Don't ask me for rockets, man. But but even if you don't get rocks that you might forget
Mm-hmm.
to take out the bag, what you can do is write it down on paper or like put make sear it into your memory.
Mm-hmm.
Because you write it down on paper. Sometimes the paper is in a journal, and then next you
Yeah.
finish the journal and you don't see it anymore. But make it a point to practice gratitude regularly. And
Yeah.
I don't mean like, oh, like the foo-foo stuff that people do, but the Bible is full of Thanksgiving.
Mm-hmm.
Thanksgiving. Paul says doing all things in thanks, prayer, supplication, and thanksgiving.
Right.
And so when we develop this heart and this attitude of gratitude and thanksgiving,
Mm-hmm.
then we can position ourselves to remember the promises of God, the faithfulness of God. And so when we begin to doubt, when we encounter hard times, when we question who we are, we can go back to that thanksgiving and remember that if he brought us through that, he can bring us through this, right? And if
Mm-hmm.
we remember who we are in Christ. Because that doesn't change. And so for me, one of the things that I have been evolving to recently is when because I still struggle with imposter syndrome. I still do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But when I do, I literally will start to say, all the features, right?
Right.
I'll look up my testimonials. I'm like, okay,
Right.
yeah, people love me. I am great at what I do, right? But one of the things that I started to do more recently when I began to
Mm-hmm.
feel this way is I
Mm-hmm.
started to look up scriptures about identity.
Mm-hmm.
Because I realized that my identity shouldn't be anchored in what I do. It should
Right.
be anchored in whose I am.
Mm-hmm.
And then because that's unshakable because if I go through a slump, does that
Mm-hmm.
change who I am?
Right.
No. But too often I linked the ups and downs of business
Mm-hmm.
to my identity. And when things were down, I wanted to quit because I was not sure of myself.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought
Right.
that when things turned down, that was a reflection of who I was.
Wow.
It wasn't.
Yeah. Oh man. Yo, you're hitting on some things that are so important because along our journey, we always have doubts and things that creep up. But now you just hit on something that I think is just as important, which is our identity. And especially when you talk about, content creators and online entrepreneurs, is we can get so caught up in the perception or, the brand that we've built, whether it be a personal brand or a brand for your business, that we are trying to put on for lack of a better term, like a facade or portray an image. And sometimes it's not genuine to who we are as individuals. And to your point, sometimes people don't even know who they are. They define themselves by their business, by their brand, or by the image that they portray online. And I think that what you just hit on is so important, which is making sure you understand where your identity is grounded, and going back to what you mentioned earlier, like not compromising that either, just so that you can have a successful business too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You have to be authentic. And I think now
Hmm.
the way the market is going, I
Hmm.
think that I don't know how people survive as a business without being authentic. Because I think
Yeah.
that people have been so used to the fake, so
Hmm.
used to the lies,
Hmm.
that when somebody's authentic, it allows you to really resonate with that person.
Right.
And I think one of the reasons why I think that people become fake in the business is because they're afraid of missing out on money. They
Hmm.
think that who they serve is everybody. and that if they're authentic, people won't like them. But what they're doing is there's people who God has ordained to reach you.
Mhm.
If you're not showing up the way He has called you to show up, how are the people who
Mhm.
He has ordained for you to reach? How are they going to know that it's you?
Right.
If you're wearing a mask, like if you think about and like we've been in the pandemic, right, for
Mhm.
however long at this point.
Yeah.
But when people wear a mask, I don't know if you've seen it where like you might recognize somebody, but that person might not recognize you because half your
Mhm.
face is covered, and people like briefly pull down their mask, like, "Hey, it's me," and they're like, "Oh,
Right.
yeah, right." I sometimes we do that. Like we need to pull down the mask a little bit in our business.
Mhm.
You don't have to be wild because some people like take it way too far. But
Yeah.
even those people who take it way too far, they have their own tribe who appreciate them taking it way too far.
Right.
But I think that we have to get comfortable with the fact that we don't serve everybody.
Yeah.
All money isn't good money. And
Not
if
at
you
all.
have to hide who you are, if you have to compromise and be authentic, then you're building a business that you hate.
Mhm.
You're building a business that it's not going to be sustainable because you won't want to work it. Because
Right.
at some point, people get tired of being an actress or an actor in
Mhm.
your own business. I remember before, like even when I was part of the reason why I shut down my business for 3 years, and I say it
Mhm.
kind of like in a bad thing, but that was the best thing I could have ever done for my healing.
Mm.
I literally was exhausted from
Mhm.
having to be a best actress
Wow.
in my
Wow.
business. When
Yeah.
I would show up to my lives, I had to be like, okay, like pump myself up to be an actress.
Right.
I was in
Right.
pain. I was
Mm.
suffering.
Yeah.
I was struggling financially because my emotions were all out of whack. I was
Mhm.
trying imposter syndrome. I
Mhm.
was trying to act like everything was together. I wanted my twins to not feel any lack because I'm a single mom. And so what I was doing, and people do this in the business, so don't think I'm only talking about my personal life. People do this in business. I started to look around
Mhm.
at what the parents who are married did. I
Mhm.
started to look at the type of vacations they took. I started to look at the type of parties birthday parties we were inviting to. And I said, I have to do that
Mm.
because that's what families do. I have
Mhm.
to do that. And what happened is I had actually had a nice savings. I had really good investments,
Mhm.
but it disappeared.
Mm.
Not because it was stolen, but because I spent it.
Mhm.
Because I was operating in pain. I
Mm.
was exhausted from being an actress in my own business, and I was
Mhm.
comparing myself to other people and
Yeah.
feeling like in order for me to be valued, I had to do what they did. And
Yeah.
we do the exact same thing in our business. We're looking over at our competition. We're looking at the people who are quote unquote winning. You don't even know if they're winning. They could just be the loudest person on Instagram.
Right.
You don't know. But you're looking at whatever that person is doing on social media, switching your whole business strategy depending
Mm.
on what the latest guru is saying is working for them. Because I've been there. I'm not saying this to be disrespectful. I
Yeah.
was the one who had a strategy, and this is before I quit my job. I had
Mhm.
a strategy to do X, Y, and Z, and then A became popular, and so I
Yeah.
abandoned everything I was doing that was beginning to get traction. Abandoned it because someone else said this worked faster, or
Right.
this better, or this could make more money. And so I was constantly chasing this shiny object instead of being authentic to what made sense in my business. And
Mhm.
this is the thing, we need to have focus as an entrepreneur. We need time to give stuff needs time to work.
Yeah.
Everybody who claims to be an overnight success on Instagram, most of them are lying.
Mhm.
But yet we are judging our own ability to be successful. We're making assumptions about our own character. We're making assumptions about the validity of our business based upon what we're seeing from other people, and we're competing with them without realizing that, without also understanding that people are only showing their highlights. They're not
Right.
showing the real deal. And so I share all of that to say that you have to have focus. You have to be focused on the vision that God has given you. Be authentic to it. Run your race, put blinders on, and don't allow um, the competition to cause you to doubt.
Right.
looking at your competition, I think it has some healthy facets to it
Mm-hmm.
because I have a corporate finance background. I did business development, restructuring. I did a lot of strategy in business.
Mm-hmm.
So looking at your competition has good points. When
Mm-hmm.
you're trying to understand your market, when you're trying to understand what works and what doesn't work, where you're trying to see where your people gather
Yeah.
and understand the SWOT, the strength, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats of what you're going
Mm-hmm.
into, where you're looking at a lot of different things from a market analysis type perspective. But
Right.
that's kind of like where it ends. But
Yeah.
too often we build our business looking at our competition
Mm-hmm.
instead of looking at the vision that God has given us.
That's so important. And what I want to kind of get into next is how all of the lessons that you've learned through the ups, the downs, and everything that you've encountered along your journey, how does that allow you to better serve your customers, your clients?
This is going to sound so simple, but it's so basic. It's giving me more empathy.
Mm,
I feel like I serve from the heart instead of looking at what I'm going to get out of in return.
mm,
And it's changed how I show up.
mhm,
It's totally changed how I show up. And actually, somebody who knew me then and now told me this a couple of years ago. She said, before you sounded like the expert who
mm,
was a know it all, who had all the answers. And she said, you sound different now.
mm,
You sound like you understand these women. You're not here, right? And
yeah,
you're not making yourself here and they're here. And you're here just to be the expert, right? She said, you show up with this genuine desire to help.
mhm,
You understand where they are because you've been there.
right,
And you can deal with them in gentleness. Meet them where they are to help to bring them to where they need to be.
yeah,
Yes, I'm still the expert,
mhm,
but there's a different level of interaction that comes with that expert. It's not in a it's not in a prideful way.
mhm,
It's not in a know-it-all way.
mhm,
My tips were amazing, and I was still getting great responses from my workshops.
yeah,
But the way I interact with my clients are different. It's different. There
mhm,
have been times when I might have had a session planned because I was working with one particular client
mhm,
on transforming her money management mindset and her
mm,
finances. And she was telling me like why she was intimidated by budgeting, why she was afraid of looking at her finances,
mhm.
her struggles. And I listened and I just let her talk. And I said, I get you. I said, because I went through the same thing. And here's how I can help you get to the other side. And it
Mhm.
wasn't like, let me tell you what all the tips, tricks, and financial principles are, because
Right.
people know it. They know it. But what they want is somebody who one of the things that I love about Jesus, this image just came to my mind.
Mm,
When Jesus, what one of the last acts he did with his disciples before he went to the cross was he washed his feet.
mm.
Jesus was the embodiment of God in a human body. But what did he do? He knew he was about to die.
Right.
He could have like preached a whole bunch of sermons in between there and Gethsemane, right? He could have.
So true.
But what did he do?
Mhm,
And I like, and one of the things that this is total aside. One of the
mhm.
things that I've always that I thought was fascinating, and I'm like, you know what? He could have got himself off the cross and be like, "Yo, I told you I was coming." Could have, and been
Right.
I brought all of you up, like you didn't want to listen. Like, he could have done that.
Yeah.
He was humble. He was
Mhm,
humble, and the act of servitude that he had, the heart of service, as evidenced by how he talked to people. He
mhm.
washed his disciples' feet, knowing he was about to be betrayed and killed.
Yeah.
He knew it, but yet he still bent down on his knees and washed their feet. He encountered the woman at the well.
Mhm,
Um, she was living a life far outside of what she was supposed to. She had been ostracized by the
mhm.
community, and Jesus sat down with her and was kind.
Right.
And I think that was the biggest thing that I learned. Not that I wasn't kind before,
Mhm,
because I was, but it was this type of empathy.
Hmm.
It allowed me to, instead of sitting there as an expert telling them everything that they needed to do, but to be somebody who was willing to take a journey with them.
Right. Right. Wow.
Lead
And then that makes a difference. Yeah, that makes a difference because then it becomes more about just providing a service, but actually serving people. And I think that there's a distinct difference between the two. I think a lot of people can provide a service as long as they know the frameworks and everything that's required to do so. But it takes a very, very intentional person to set out with the goal of serving other people. And I think that that goes back to the illustration that you pointed out, where before you may have just been pointing out the principles of what somebody can do to get their stuff in order and to, put the budget that they need in place versus actually saying, you know what, I know how you feeling. I know what it's like, and I can walk you through how to get from where you are now to where you desire to be. That's
them.
a completely different approach. And to your point, like that's empathy. And I think that that's something that is often missed in business is that there is very little empathy. Oftentimes people are focused on the money and just making sure that okay, I got you the product, I got you the service, and now I'm looking forward to receiving my payment.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah, we're trying to be like, okay, I got my product, you got your product, I got my service. Now let me figure out what I can sell you next. So
right.
it's like increasing more. It's about
Mhm.
me, right? Instead of
Yeah.
it's about you, because we both can win.
Mhm. Yep. I think it becomes more transactional versus
Yeah,
being more relational. And I think that that's where some people, some businesses have an edge is when they transcend just being transactional with their customers or their client base and they focus on building relationships. I think that that's a huge, huge, unique selling point from a business perspective. But ultimately, I think it really allows a brand or a person to be more genuine when it comes to how their customers perceive them.
absolutely. And then as you were saying, I thought about Apple. Apple Apple comes out with a new phone every year.
Right.
But people are like connected at the heart to Apple. Like
Mhm.
it's an emotional relationship.
Right.
Apple, and it's just a phone.
Yeah.
There's a whole bunch of phones out here as I look down at
Mhm.
my phone. But like, you can choose anything. But why do people choose Apple?
Mhm.
It's how Apple makes them feel.
Right.
And it becomes, even though it's transactional, it's not like you get to know the Genius Bar people. Like
Right.
they're buying it online, like, but
Mhm.
it feels like there's a connection.
Yeah.
Like Apple gets us and
Mhm.
they understand the type of interface and simplicity and
Right.
color scheme and how we want to use our phone. And it just
Mhm.
draws us in.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that we need. And I would advise any, especially a new entrepreneur, new content creator, look at
Mhm.
the brands that speak to you
Yeah.
and figure out what they have in common, because
Mhm.
those words that come up as you're looking at those things are the same words that reflect your brand. When
Right.
I did that, it was so helpful. I started to look
Mhm.
at the brands that I loved and
Mhm.
admired. I started to look even at some of the people in terms of their
Mhm.
style that I really admired and I
Yeah.
looked up to, like in terms of fashion, in terms of style.
Mhm.
And I don't have, clearly I have a personal finance business. I have a strategy business, right, for single moms. And but yeah, I found myself thinking, okay, when I look at the market, what speaks to me?
Mhm.
And all of a sudden, I started to look at those brands, look at those people, and allow and find those commonalities, and identify at its core what is it telling me about the things that matter most to me, and what are
Right.
the things that my brand needs to communicate as well.
Mhm. Yeah, that's so important. And I think that that's one of the benefits of being an entrepreneur is that you get to connect more on a relational level than a huge brand or conglomerate. Like for them, as you mentioned, it is very transactional in the way that they conduct business. And the best thing that they can do is develop a brand that gives off that sense of emotion and feeling and that relational vibe. But the beauty of being an entrepreneur, the beauty of being a content creator is that every piece of content you put out, every client that you work with, you are working towards developing a relationship if that is your focus. Like if you get intent on serving people, as we mentioned before, and developing genuine relationships and helping people, man, it will stand out amongst other people who may be doing the same thing, who may be talking about or putting out very similar content, or who have similar businesses. Like you can stand out just by focusing in on developing relationships with your customers, your clients, and your audience.
Absolutely. And the interesting thing is, it's like, it takes intentionality. So
Mhm,
I was just thinking about this girl on Facebook who I'm
mhm,
connected with. Never met her in real life, but she's so authentic. She's
mm,
just so genuine on Facebook, and she does taxes.
mm.
Taxes.
Wow.
So how many people do taxes?
A lot.
A lot.
A whole lot. A
But she has,
whole lot.
and people know her as a tax lady. That's
Mhm,
how she's known. But guess what? Her and her family got sick recently.
mm.
And do you realize her followers were
Mhm.
mailing her care packages?
Wow.
They were. She would ask questions about, like, well, what worked for you, when you
Mhm,
were dealing with this particular disease. And people not only were giving their tips on how they beat this particular disease, um, but not they took it a step further to literally mail her
mm.
stuff
Yeah.
so she can get better.
Right.
It was amazing.
Yeah.
And just because I saw her post, like, thank you. These are
Mhm.
people she's never met before,
Wow.
never had, like, most of them never had one-on-one conversations with her.
Mm.
But yet, the way she shows up,
Mhm.
you can tell that she wants to help people
Yeah.
to be able to get their taxes right, to minimize the risk that could happen if they don't, and to
Right.
make it easy for them to get
Mhm.
it right. And that her heart comes off to the point where people, and then she shares little snippets about her personal life. She shares
Mhm.
snippets about, things that she has going on. But people have drawn into her because they know that she cares. And
Yeah.
she's not in it for the money. Yes, she charges. She can't get your taxes done for free or a discount.
Right.
She pays, like, you're gonna pay to go
Mhm.
to her. But people pay it willingly
Yeah.
because they know her heart behind what
Mhm.
she does.
Yeah. That matters so much, man. Wow, Aisha, this has been such an amazing conversation. There's one thing that I like to do with my guests before we close out, and that's play a fun little game called Pick Three. So the way it's going to work is I'm going to ask you to pick three random numbers, and based on the number that you select, there'll be a question that I'll have to share with you that you'll answer. That makes sense?
Mhm.
All right, cool, cool. So the first question will be based on any number that you select between 1 and 16. What number would you like to go with?
3.
Three. So the question is, what is a book that you want to read but you haven't picked up yet?
Ah. I'm trying to think. I'm, like, looking around like, what's so 'cause, like, that's hard to choose just one. You know why?
Why's
Because
that?
whenever somebody makes a book recommendation and
hmm
that person is somebody that I respect, I buy
hmm
the book and then put it on my shelf.
hmm
Um, there's one that, like, let's see, can I see any? Like, no, I started. Okay, no, I put all the books up. Okay, so there's one book that I started.
hmm
Called. It's called Boundaries with Kids. Boundaries with Kids.
Okay.
And the reason, like, my kids are amazing. I love my kids. But one of the things I know that for me, I'm a big nurturer and I'm a single mom,
hmm
right?
hmm
And so for me, this book is really amazing because it talks about a lot of people have probably heard about the book Boundaries by Adults.
hmm
And same authors, but
hmm
the authors are working with adults on boundaries. And the adults started to ask, well, how do you develop boundaries with kids?
hmm
And so in that, I was just, like, hooked on the first, like, one of the opening pages
hmm
where it says that when you implement boundaries with kids early on,
Mhm.
By boundaries, meaning like assigning responsibilities, expectations,
Mhm.
following through with those things, then you help train them to
Mhm.
be adults. And so this is a
Wow.
total aside. Like one of the things that I struggle with, especially as a single mom, was discipline. And
Mm.
so I was
Mhm.
approaching motherhood more like I'm my kids' friends than
Mhm.
mom. And so
Mhm.
I realized that the Lord calls me, the Lord disciplines those he loves. And the Lord has called me to be good stewards over my children. And I
Yes.
realized that if I didn't change my perspective on
Mhm.
what that meant, then I
Mhm.
wasn't doing what I needed to do for my kids.
Mm.
And so when I got that book, I was so convicted by it because some of the examples of what people were saying about adults
Mhm.
started in childhood. And so
Mm.
I didn't do this because my kids were bad or anything.
Yeah.
I just did it because I wanted to be a better steward. Oh, I bought the book because I wanted to be a better steward over the gifts that God has given me.
Nah, that's good. That's good. I love that. I love that. So what's your second number? Any number between 1 and 16?
5.
5. The question is, if you receive $1 million tomorrow to spend as you please, what would you personally spend it on?
You asked a finance person this.
Right. Yo, you just picked lucky number 5.
What I would do is the first thing I would do is I would sit down with a financial planner
Smart woman.
to create my goals.
Yeah.
I would invest the bulk of it to make it
Mhm.
grow. I would take some to pay off um, debt,
Mhm.
and then I would take a little piece of it to, build up savings,
Mhm.
build savings for the kids, stuff like that, build investments for the kids. And then I would do some fun stuff with it, like go on vacation. But the bulk of it I would use to make it grow.
That makes sense. Yo, make your money work for you, right?
And then do my
That's
best
the
to live
goal.
off the interest.
Yes, right. That's right. So, what's your third number between 1 and 16?
7.
7. The question is, if you could go back in time, what is one thing that you would change about your business or how you got started?
Okay. Most of the times I use it like I wouldn't change anything because it's all taught me lessons that I'm now able to help other people with. But I
Mhm.
was actually the reason why this is actually kind of timely is I was actually talking to somebody about this recently about one of the biggest
Mm,
mistakes that I think that I made early on in my
mm,
business. So there's two things. I didn't really have a strategy. I just
okay.
kind of winged it according
Mhm.
to how I felt like it. And in some respects it hurt because I didn't know where I was going.
Mhm.
Um, I mean, I just did it, started my business because I love I was learning more about managing my own money, and I
Mhm.
wanted to be able to share the lessons with other people. And so I
Right.
started a blog, and then the blog became a book, and then the book started to, take off. And then I started to, sign up for all of these services and stuff like that. But this is the one thing that I would change is I think that I spent too much money in the beginning.
Mm, okay.
And, and I say this as somebody who is a consultant who
Yes.
does, who does help people turn their ideas into income, who does help with strategic planning, who does
Mhm.
help people to understand the link between their personal and business finances and be able to grow them both. So I say this as somebody who does this for a living.
Right.
Um, but I want to help you to not make a mistake.
Yeah.
And so I think what I did is I looked at the services and the subscriptions that the gurus had.
Mhm.
Oh, I need to have this. Oh, here I am as a brand new person. I didn't take advantage of a lot of the free stuff that was
Mm,
available. Like you have services like, MailChimp that have
mhm.
like free level of service, right? That you
Right.
can use at like you can use until you start to earn more money. And
Mhm.
so I would say have an ROI on everything that you spend, return on investment. So don't just spend money because someone told you that it's a good idea. Don't um, if you hire a coach or a consultant, don't
Mhm.
just get caught up on the marketing messages.
Mhm.
Know what help you need. Spend some time saying like, okay, what skills I might be am I potentially deficient in?
Right.
Where do I need help? Because some people they don't need coaching. Sometimes people just need to hire help. Some
Hmm.
people, their return might be better on having a VA.
Yeah.
Some people's return might be better on having someone, help them to be able to execute their tasks, but they know where they're going. And I say, like, know what you need, have a return on investment, and don't just spend money because some of these marketing messages sound good.
Mhm.
Know what you're going to get out of it and have a plan to 10x that.
Wow.
Otherwise, you're just flushing money down the toilet.
Right. Oh man. Powerful. Yo, before we wrap things up, I want to hand the mic over to you. Are there any questions that you like to ask me personally, or any last or closing words you like to leave our audience with?
So, one question that I want to ask you is this makes me so. I actually had two questions, and they
Okay.
sound so basic, but they just popped into my mind. Like, what was your heart behind this? Like, what problems did you see in the
Hmm.
marketplace, and why you were like, "Hey, you know, this is needed"? Because, and the reason why I'm asking this, and the
Hmm.
reason, just in case anybody's wondering who's listening, we were talking earlier about marketplaces being crowded, right?
Right.
We were talking about how people sometimes question whether or not their voice matters. We were
Hmm.
talking about people wondering if their service or their product even has a place in the marketplace. And the
Right.
reason why I wanted to ask Jay this is because there are so many podcasts.
Hmm.
There are so many business podcasts. And he is
Right.
an example of someone who saw what was in front of him, which some
Hmm.
people might turn into a mountain because they're looking at the competition and other people who are in the marketplace. And it says, you
Hmm.
know what? My voice matters. I'm going to start this. So that's why I wanted to ask you.
Nah, that's a great question. And I definitely thought about that because, coming from Right to Real Love, it being a relationship podcast, more specifically being a relationship podcast for people of faith, and then transitioning into a business podcast, I knew already, I was like, there are so many business podcasts. Like, I knew that that category is so saturated, but I just had a call on me because for me personally, it took me a minute. Like, to be completely honest, I had different iterations of why we succeed before it launched, and even after it's launched. I've changed and tweaked things as the vision and my goal and the people that I want to help has become more clear to me. So I don't want to act like I just always knew exactly what the direction was going to be. I would say it was recent, like maybe a couple months ago, where I really knew that I wanted to help people like myself, where I was like 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 7 years ago, when I was a content creator, had no issues with creating content, being consistent, building an audience that way, but failing to monetize it. And I just know that that's a struggle that a lot of content creators have, whether they're YouTubers or podcasters or bloggers, or even social media influencers. Some people have that challenge of making money from what they do. Like, I love it, it's my passion, it's my purpose, but I don't know how to make any money from it. And that was a challenge that I faced. So I wanted to take the things and the lessons that I've learned and be able to share that with other people, and then also have conversations with influencers, professionals, and entrepreneurs who have been able to even 10x the things that I've done. Just being able to, one, glean from them myself, but also be able to share with people who are usually at a place in their journey that's not as far as me. Like, having been doing this for 10 years, I want to help the person that's in year one, ideally, or the person that's within those first 2 3 years, or wherever they may be along their journey. How can you start making money from what you're doing as a content creator? So, like, that's my overall objective now. And I would say, in tandem with that, is when I saw the statistics for African American or Black entrepreneurs just in the US, when I saw how low that percentage was, that really bothered me. I couldn't believe it because I know how creative, how industrious our people are, and to see that we weren't really represented in the field of entrepreneurship, that was something that inside I also want to change. And I contemplated, focusing solely on Black entrepreneurs. And the more that the vision became clear, I know that that's a goal that I want to reach. But ultimately, I know I want to help content creators to really get to that place where they can start an online business. So that's really my focus for starting While We Succeed and what my aim is currently.
That's good. I love it. I love it. So, like, what I want people to realize is that he did his market research. He had his why. He was able to look at where there was a void in the market and decided how he was going to fill it. And then the other thing was, and I want to make sure you guys caught this, was that he was not afraid to launch and tweak. Because sometimes we get tripped up because we want to make our plan perfect before we do anything. And
Right.
so let's be clear. You have to know where you're going.
Hmm.
Right. But sometimes that initial vision is just enough to get you started, but you don't have to be married to it. And
Yeah.
so allow yourself to evolve as you grow, as you learn more, as you begin walking, right? Because sometimes the path only appears once we start walking.
Right.
And what we're initially given is a hint of where we're going to be going. So don't let
Mhm.
not having everything or all the answers stop you. And so
Yeah.
the other question I want to ask you
Yes.
is one of the things that I noticed is that you said making their first $1,000 per month.
Hmm.
So here's why I'm going to ask you this,
Hmm.
because you look at online now,
Hmm.
so many people are talking about making 100K months, making
Right.
10K months, making
Hmm.
5K months. And it's almost as if there's this attitude that if you have a smaller goal
Hmm.
or a side income, because 100K, 1K a month is $12,000 per year.
Yeah.
What can most people do with $12,000 a year? An
Hmm.
extra $1,000 is life changing. An extra 500 to about an extra 500 to $1,000 actually keeps most people out of homelessness and bankruptcy.
Hmm.
So there's a lot of power to that number when you look at the statistics for why people get their cars repoed, their
Hmm.
homes foreclosed on, which drives them into a financial tailspin. Usually it's about $1,000. So,
Mm. Wow.
um, so I was fascinated when you said that because that in and of itself is actually countercultural to
Mm.
where you see a lot of people on Instagram and social going right now. So I wanted
Right.
to ask you, how did you get to that point?
That's another amazing question. And it goes back to that same journey. Like I just started to look at like what you mentioned. Most people are trying to hit 10K months, or, for those who are really reaching for the stars, hitting 100K, $1 million months. Like, so for me, first and foremost, like I haven't accomplished that. So it goes back to what we were talking about being authentic and genuine is like there are financial goals that I personally haven't hit yet. So I feel like it would be disingenuous for me to tell people that, oh, I'm gonna help you make, 10K, 100K, or $1 million a month when that's not something that I've done. So like that's part of it. But then I started looking at the fact that, okay, I want to help content creators and I want to help them to monetize and make money. But then I started to think that everybody's at different stages in their journey. Like, so I don't want people coming and their goal is to make 10K or 100K, and they already know how to make money as a podcaster, as a YouTuber, or as a blogger. So I wanted to really approach those beginners. And even without knowing it, I know that if you can start making $1,000 or plus monthly as a content creator, that's life changing. Like, or at least it was for me. When I first got to a place where I was consistently bringing in $1,000 or more from the things that I was doing as a content creator, like it shifted. It showed me that, okay, one, this is financially viable. And now I just have to figure out what tools, what strategies can I do to, scale it. But I knew that that's not what I wanted to do with Why We Succeed. Like, I'm not here to show people how to scale and, quote unquote, grow beyond what they already are at. I want to help those people who are struggling and they don't know how to even make their first dollar. And it's like, I know that we can get you to a place that you can not just make your first dollar, but get to a place where you can consistently make $1,000 or more a month. That's something that I've done. It's something that I've been able to consistently do for over a couple of years now. And it's something that I feel confident being able to share with other people who are just coming along this journey or have been along the journey as a content creator, but just haven't figured out how to monetize yet. So that's the nuts and bolts, like kind of my thought process behind why I chose that number as opposed to some of the more common and bigger numbers that are often promoted.
I love it because you're authentic to you. You knew who you were helping, and you're walking into in integrity.
So
Um,
important. So important.
which is so important. So yeah, that's what I wanted to ask you.
No, those are great questions, and I appreciate you asking it because I can tell when I have better clarity with the things that I'm doing when questions like that are posed and I'm able to answer them without stumbling and fumbling and like not really sure what it is I'm trying to accomplish. And that's really how it was when I first was in the process of launching Why We Succeed. Like people would ask me what the focus was, and I had like a cursory understanding, but like now it becomes a lot more clear. I know who I'm trying to help. I know what stage they're at as a content creator. I know what type of financial goal I'm trying to help them to hit, and I know what it is I want to convey, what messages, what things we want to teach them. So it makes it a lot more clear when I can convey that to you and other people that are tuning in and listening. But more specifically, when it comes to creating content, bringing on guests, and talking about things that are going to have that type of impact on the audience.
Yeah, that's cool. So clarity is key. Taking the time to get clear, to
It
be
is.
confident, and it didn't come overnight. You
Not
didn't
at all.
get clarity
Not at all.
it came
It
through
took months and
action.
months.
It is so funny because even my business, like as
Mhm.
I said, I've had a business for about 10 years now.
Yeah.
And it's gone through so many iterations. And I think that is one other thing that I want to tell people, like,
Mhm.
don't be afraid to change.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid to change. When I first started off my business, it
Mhm.
was because I was a single woman in corporate making six figures a year, and I wanted to figure out and show people. I figured out how to live a Sex in the City lifestyle on a budget, and I wanted
Mhm.
to show people how that was possible
Right.
because I had a whole bunch of credit card debt, but yeah, I like to have fun. And so I'm like, okay, so how can I have fun, pay off this credit card debt, and build up my savings at the same time? And so
Right.
really, that's what it came from. And so it was interesting because, like I said, and I don't say this to brag, I just say this to make a point
Mhm.
because my audience was six, like women in corporate
Yeah.
who had no kids, who were making enough money where all they were really trying to figure out was how to avoid overspending so that way they can meet their financial goals and still have fun.
Mhm.
So it was a different type of conversation that people
Yes.
were having. It was about managing the excess, right?
Mhm.
And so here I am when I began to get invited to different audiences.
Mhm.
And the question wasn't managing the excess,
Mhm.
it was about managing what they had to
Right.
cover the things that they need.
Mhm.
But it wasn't until I went through what I did where I could connect with those women.
Right.
And so now I can connect with the people who are trying to manage that excess,
Mhm.
but also manage what they need
Yeah.
because I've been there and I have the empathy to understand both. But what happened was is as I began to get that clarity, because
Mhm.
clearly trying to have a Sex in the City lifestyle on a budget is not Jesus, right? That's the wrong way. So, which is it makes more sense why I wasn't talking about him in the beginning. But I say all that to give yourself permission to evolve. The business that you
Yes.
start now doesn't necessarily have to be the one that you're building in 5 years, in 10 years. Just start.
Right.
Just start.
Yeah. That's so important. And I mean, like that right there is a mic drop. But were there any other closing words that you like to share with the audience?
Oh, I cannot end this podcast interview without doing a plug for finances.
Yes.
Please, people, when you start your business, I've talked a lot about just start, right?
Mhm.
And having a strategic plan and knowing where you're going. But one thing I don't want you to compromise on is setting your business up the right way. So when especially now because like the IRS size just doubled.
Yeah.
So you need, especially now, to make sure you have your paperwork in order.
Mhm.
Make sure you have a system. Like I I'm a big believer in really. not having to spend extra money unless you need it. Like, I absolutely love QuickBooks. I would recommend QuickBooks to anybody.
Hmm.
Wave accounting is also free, and Wave accounting is very
Hmm.
solid financial management system. So have a way where you have a business bank account,
Hmm.
get an EIN, right? File for an LLC because the LLC keeps your personal assets separate from your business assets. When you get the LLC, when you get the business bank account, make sure that you're legitimately keeping your business transactions separate from your personal ones, because if you merge or mix the two, then somebody can argue, if for whatever reason, default on debt or get sued, something like that. Somebody can actually argue that your personal assets are separate from your business, and you can put your personal assets at risk. So whatever you do, don't skip on that. Business bank account, EIN, LLC paperwork. Um, keep your receipts. I know you can take a picture of them and upload them to the transactions. File your taxes. Pay your taxes. Don't run your business through Cash App. Have, like, if you have Wave accounting, if you have QuickBooks, send invoices to people. If you
Hmm.
have another like system like a Thrive cart or something like that for shopping carts, do it the right way. Do
Yeah.
it the right way. And I know Jay was talking earlier about even just the Black community. Sometimes in the Black community, we've grown up seeing people not doing it the right way. But
Hmm.
that does not, just because it's what we've seen, it doesn't make it right.
Not at all.
Do it the right way, please.
Yes. Oh man, that's
And pay
good.
the
And
taxes.
yeah, pay your taxes always,
Don't do
always. Don't mess
that.
around.
And I've seen people try and make a cash only business to avoid paying taxes. Like, number one, that's not ethical. That's
No,
not ethical.
not
And
at
the
all.
other thing is you get in trouble for that.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
Nah, that's good. Definitely let everybody know how they can show you some love and support, how they can get in contact with you if they want to work with you. Definitely let them know.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I want to encourage you all to connect with me over on Instagram at fnphenomenal. So F and phenomenal. I'll also go to fnphenomenal.com. You can connect, you can email me over at hello at fnphenomenal.com. Also on YouTube at fnphenomenal.com/YouTube. And on YouTube, I actually teach Bible studies. I know I've shared a lot about my personal journey, but I share that as well as a form of encouragement. I would also encourage people to pick up my book. It's called Navigating the Impossible, a survival guide for single moms from pregnancy through their first year of motherhood. And honestly, even if you're not like pregnant, half the book I talk about managing your personal finances. Another big part of the book, I talk about growing your faith. And that stuff is universal. So don't feel like, even if you're not pregnant or have a 1 year old, that you won't benefit from the book, because if you're somebody who needs help, especially getting back up again after trials and setbacks, you will benefit from that book. So definitely pick up your copy of Navigating the Impossible, which is over at navigatingtheimpossiblebook.com.
Fantastic. And I'm going to make sure that I have the links to everything that you just mentioned in the description. So it's so much easier for everybody to find it and access it. I hope that you guys will go and show Aisha some love and support. Thank you again for coming on. I appreciate your transparency and all of the amazing gems and insights that you share with us. If you're ever interested in coming back on, you know you got an open invitation to do so. But thank you again, Aisha, for everything you shared with us today. I truly, truly appreciate you.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
No problem.